land, sea, air, even cyberspace. We could deploy where we wanted, when we wanted, and operate however we wanted. We used to be able to look up to the stars with certain knowledge that we were absolutely dominant in space, but today all those domains are now contested. Now contested because our adversaries have carefully studied the American way of war, and principally in the CENTCOM theater. They watch us in Desert Storm and OIF, OER, or OIR, and every other conflict we've been engaged in since the end of the Cold War. They've looked at what they perceive to be our vulnerabilities. They've developed capabilities that are designed specifically to disrupt our ability to operate freely across every domain. They've made significant adaptations and accelerated their modernization programs, assisted by a staggering degree of outright theft of U.S. intellectual property, to asymmetrically counter our ability to project power. They've also carefully analyzed our limits of combat power. They've deduced our red lines and have consequently become masters of operating below them in this gray zone, in that space below armed conflict and slightly above what was previously considered normal statecraft. They employ asymmetric warfare in an attempt to erode our strength, erode our confidence, and erode our will, all while avoiding decisive military confrontation. In this environment, the cyberspace domain is an important tool and will be increasingly leveraged. Growing connectivity throughout the globe presents some great opportunities, but those opportunities come with some significant risks. Many nations, including several in CENTCOM's AOR, are looking to Chinese and Russian companies like Huawei and Kaspersky to provide the commercial software and hardware required to build their telecommunications infrastructure. These developments not only threaten U.S. economic influence, but also provide concerns about cybersecurity and protecting our networks forward in partner nations. Here are but a few examples of our adversaries operating effectively in the gray zone. As early as 2008, Russia was able to infiltrate U.S. networks when a flash drive was inserted into a U.S. military computer in the CENTCOM AOR. That led to a massive remediation effort and dramatically influenced U.S. cybersecurity posture, and I'm here probably with many of you who have never used a flash drive since. The next example should be eye-opening for everyone. Russia employed the most devastating cyber attack in history in June of 2017. It began as an assault on Ukraine, but its effects were felt around the globe. It was described by cyber experts as the equivalent of using a nuclear bomb to achieve a small tactical victory, and the attack is known as NotPetya. Now, there's probably many of you who have read Wired magazine, but for those that haven't and aren't familiar with the cyber attack, there's a really great article in that magazine, and if you haven't read it, I highly recommend you do. I'll give you a quick synopsis. Russia had been using their years-long conflict with Ukraine as a scorched earth testing ground for their cyber tactics, including hacking into dozens of Ukrainian governmental organizations and destroying terabytes of data. They caused widespread power outages during the winter months to inflict pain upon the people, eroding their trust in the government's ability to protect them and provide essential services. NotPetya was designed to penetrate through a piece of accounting software that is used extensively in Ukraine, similar to our use of TurboTax or Quicken. It is used by nearly everyone filing taxes or doing business in Ukraine. The cyber attack worked by employing two different hacking exploits. The first was a penetration tool known as Eternal Blue that exploited a Windows vulnerability. The second tool was called Mimikatz. It was used to steal user credentials to hack into other machines on a network. Now, Microsoft created patches for the vulnerabilities exposed by Eternal Blue when it became known in 2017, but of course, not all computers had these updates. As a reminder, download your updates. And once NotPetya had access to an unpatched computer, it could use Mimikatz to pull off passwords to gain access into machines that were already patched. NotPetya got its name from a previous ransomware software known as Petya. Petya was a piece of criminal code released the year prior that would lock out users of their accounts and demand a fee for a key to unlock their files. NotPetya provided a similar ransom message, but it was never intended to provide a fix. Its goal was purely destructive. It was designed to attack computers' operating systems, and there was no fix. So how did this attack have an effect that was likened to a nuclear bomb? Well, first, It was highly effective against its intended target in Ukraine. It hit at least 4 hospitals in Kiev, 6 power companies, 2 airports, and more than 20 Ukrainian banks. It shut down ATMs and credit card payments across the country and effectively shut down the government. Over 300 Ukrainian companies were hit, and a government official estimated over 10% of all computers in the nation were affected. The speed of the intrusion and its spread was unprecedented. It took less than 45 seconds to bring down the network of a large Ukrainian bank. Unfortunately for the rest of the world, there was a single computer in the Black Sea coastal town of Odessa that contained the accounting software that NotPetya used for access. And this software had been installed by Maersk IT administrators at the request of one of their financial executives. And that's all it took. Maersk is the largest shipping conglomerate in the world. They have nearly 80,000 employees across 8 business units, ranging from ports to drilling to logistics in 130 countries across the globe. And they have a lot of computers, about 45,000 PCs, 4,000 servers, with about 150 domain controllers. And although the intrusion did not directly affect Maersk ships, it did affect 17 of their 76 terminals and ports around the world. And as a result, ships were unable to communicate their contents to the terminals. Sprawling fields of containers were stacked 8 high over square miles of shipyards, with no way of knowing their contents without opening them individually. Trucks were arriving with new containers, and not only was there no way to read their barcodes, the gates were electronically locked, creating massive traffic jams of hundreds of semi-trucks trying to get into the port and unable to turn around. And Maersk was not the only company affected. It hit everything from hospitals in Pennsylvania to chocolate factories in Tasmania. Multinational companies like Maersk, FedEx's European subsidiary TNT Express, French construction company Saint-Gobain, food producer Mondelez, pharmaceutical company Merck, and manufacturer Reckitt Benckiser were all hit with hundreds of millions of dollars in damages each. It even bounced back to Russia, striking the state oil company Rosneft. As you might imagine, Maersk experienced a significant drop in their operations worldwide as they scrambled to maintain orders through personal emails and resort to hard copy shipping manifest. They managed to rebuild their network in just 10 days, although it would take about 2 months to completely rebuild their software setup. Now, as many of you know, in production or project management, there's 3 main variables, or quality, time, and cost. So said another way, the goal is always to produce something good, fast, and cheap. But because of the need for speed in this instance, the solution was not cheap. The costs to Maersk were estimated at over $300 million, and some say that estimate is low. In all, NotPetya was estimated to cost companies around the world over $10 billion in damages, and it continues to inflict costs for those preparing to prevent future attacks. In fact, last year, Forbes magazine estimated that banks, JP Morgan, Chase, and Bank of America spent about $500 million each on cybersecurity, and that the private sector would spend over $1 trillion by 2021. I guess I'm in the wrong business. Our adversaries impose these costs while investing relatively little in developing these capabilities. Now, NotPetya was clearly a major act of aggression, but was it an act of war? After the attack, Cisco's Craig Williams argued that the Russians knew full well the extent of the pain and damage a cyber attack would inflict internationally, meant to punish anyone doing business with Ukraine. And clearly, Russia is not alone. All the other adversaries mentioned in the NDS, China, Iran, North Korea, some violent extremist organizations continue to pursue increasingly advanced cyber capabilities to impose those disproportionate costs. Iran, our number one long-term security challenge within the CENTCOM AOR, has increased funding for its cyber efforts 12-fold in recent years. The U.S. government publicly issued indictments for members of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps for conducting distributed denial of service attacks against U.S. banks going back to 2007. Their suspected role in attacks in Saudi Arabia's Aramco are well documented. The Shamoon malware spread to 35,000 computers belonging to Saudi Aramco in 2012, and 2 weeks later, Qatari gas company Razgas was also infected, resulting in the deletion of data. Recently, a cybersecurity firm known as FireEye published a report of suspected Iranian cyber actors using LinkedIn to lure victims to join professional network to send the victim emails with malware-laden attachments that would be able to gain user credentials from the victims. Furthermore, Wall Street Journal reported in July Bahrain's Electric and Water Authority and several Bahraini government agencies were also targeted by alleged Iranian cyber actors. The cyber actors were able to shut down several systems and obtain command and control of some of the systems. Cybersecurity experts believe Iran was using Bahraini networks because of their capability to disrupt critical infrastructure. But our adversaries not only challenge us in cyberspace, they also seek to impose disproportionate costs on the physical battlefield. These costs have both an economic price tag and a very real cost in blood. At an operational level, our forces face an asymmetric threat on the battlefield that I believe will be a growing concern over the coming years, the use of unmanned aerial systems, or UAS. This threat ranges from improvised, cheap, off-the-shelf drones, as we saw ISIS use in Iraq and Syria, to more advanced systems that are being developed and provided by Iran to its proxies like the Houthis in Yemen. Our adversaries use them not only to conduct reconnaissance, but also to drop improvised explosives on friendly forces, as well as kamikaze-style attacks on partner nations' infrastructure. Houthi rebels claim to successfully launch attacks against Saudi Aramco oil refineries outside of Riyadh, and that they successfully attacked the Abu Dhabi International Airport in UAE, which suggests a range of almost 1,500 kilometers. Iran's role in advancing the capabilities and employment of UAS in Yemen is not unlike the role they played in the development of other asymmetric capabilities, such as advanced improvised explosive devices, specifically explosively formed penetrators, or EFPs, that were used against our forces in Iraq. During Operation Iraqi Freedom, we assessed hundreds of U.S. personnel deaths in Iraq were the result of Iran-backed militants' use of various asymmetric weapons, including EFPs. Now, just like every threat our nation has faced throughout its history, we rally and we met the challenge of IEDs head-on and we tried to find a solution. We rapidly fielded the mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, better known as MRAPs. From 2007 to 2012, we fielded over 12,000 MRAPs to forces operating in Iraq and Afghanistan. It may not have been the perfect vehicle, but there was no doubt that it saved countless American lives and forced our adversaries to adjust their tactics against us. Now, the MRAP was a good vehicle for its purpose, and it was fielded very quickly and under duress. But as I mentioned earlier, when dealing with the three constraints of project management, quality, time, and cost, you only get to choose two when operating under crisis. So while the MRAP was a good vehicle and it was fielded quickly, it certainly was not cheap. The program cost approximately $50 billion for 27,000 vehicles. So how does the MRAP analogy apply to the current asymmetric threats we face, like UAS? Well, like EFP, the UAS is becoming the asymmetric weapon of choice for state and non-state actors in CENTCOM. And there are hundreds of UAS we track from multiple different origins, which are engaged in surveillance, disruption, and destruction of U.S. interests every single day in our AOR. And our capacity to defend against them currently has limits. And there's no doubt in my mind that our forces will face an ever-increasing threat of UAS in the battlefield in both terms of numbers and capability. And so now we need an MRAP-like effort to counter this emerging technology and prevent the costs that could be imposed not only on U.S. forces and U.S. interests, but to the international community. And while time is of the essence, I'm convinced that there are solutions available that won't break the bank. Now, some of the best and perhaps least costly solutions will likely be non-kinetic solutions, and this is going to require military, legal, industry, and political minds to come together on a focused effort to tackle this vexing problem, and we need to act now. Now, since 2001, in the aftermath of 9/11, CENTCOM has been charged with the responsibility of commanding multiple, often simultaneous combat missions in the Central Region. We recognize the strategic importance of the Central Region to our national interests, and we will continue to face multiple adversaries operating in the Middle East. Together, we will find solutions to the evolving asymmetric threats that our adversaries will field. So I want to thank you for all that you do to support our forces, especially those operating in CENTCOM. It's been an honor to spend some time with you. Look forward to any questions you might have. And one more thing, when you're filling out your critiques at the end, just please either grade me a 1 or a 0, or you could go 1 and a 0 right next to each other. Okay, thank you very much, TAMPA. I appreciate it.